Tonight, as the day loosens its final hold and the room around you grows quiet, I want to take you somewhere older than memory, older than the first king, older than the first lamp lit against the dark. We will drift together toward a city of sun-baked brick and river mist, toward Babylon in the age when gods were still close enough to be felt in thunder and in the slow turning of the stars. But even Babylon is not our true beginning tonight. Our beginning lies farther back than walls and altars, farther back than language, farther back than the first fire carried in human hands. Our beginning lies in the hush before the world had learned its own name. So let everything become a little softer now. Let the thoughts that have followed you through the day begin to grow light at the edges. Let them thin like smoke. The bed beneath you knows how to hold your weight. The pillow knows the shape of your head. The darkness around your closed eyes does not demand anything from you. You do not have to solve the unfinished things of the day. You do not have to fix tomorrow before it arrives. You only have to listen. And even listening may soon become something gentler than effort. Take one slow breath in and feel the air arrive as though it has traveled a long distance just to meet you here. Let it leave even more slowly. If there is tightness in your jaw, let it unfasten. If your shoulders still carry the memory of hours, let them sink. If your hands are holding on to something invisible, allow them to release it. Nothing is being asked of you now except rest. There are stories that wake the mind and stories that calm it. Tonight's story belongs to an older kind of telling. It is a story meant to widen the dark until it feels kind. A story meant to place the listener not in danger, but in wonder. A story that does not rush toward its mystery, but approaches it by lamplight. Slowly, the way one walks into a temple at dusk and lowers the voice without meaning to. Before Babylon rose in terraces toward the sky. Before priests watched the stars from painted walls. Before any human hand pressed wet clay into bricks, there was a sea without shore and a silence without edge. Somewhere in that immeasurable quiet, the pattern of the world waited to be drawn. Somewhere in that depth, a power not yet crowned would one day learn how to gather storm into order. Somewhere in that darkness, the one whom later generations would call Marduk waited in possibility. Not yet born, not yet named, but already moving like a hidden thought within creation. And so we will not begin with triumph. We will not begin with battle. We will begin where sleep itself likes to begin. In dimness, in water, in the feeling of drifting backward beyond clocks and beyond worry. We will begin where the world was still, only a murmur resting inside the dark. If at any point the story grows so soft around you that it slips away, that is perfectly all right. These old names do not need to be held too tightly. They were once carried by wind, by river, by the lips of mothers soothing children beside evening fire. Let them move past you the same way now. Let them come and go like ripples. Let them be felt more than remembered, for this is not a night for effort. It is a night for surrendering to the oldest images. Still water, distant stars, not yet lit, a breath moving through the unseen. And when the story deepens, as it will, and when the world of gods and sea and storm slowly opens, you will already be there, not as a visitor standing outside it, but as someone gently floating at its edge. So allow your body to grow heavier. Allow the muscles of the face to become smooth. Allow the mind to stop arranging the world into lists and plans. Let the room fade. Let the hour fade. Let the familiar boundaries of the day unmake themselves a little. There is a place before roads, before roofs, before the moon had learned the path it would one day keep. There is a place before wheat, before bronze, before any bird crossed the morning with a cry. There is a place where darkness is not empty, only patient. A place where everything that would ever be loved, built, feared, sung, or remembered still rests in one unbroken stillness. Tonight, we are going there, and as we leave behind the names of the day and sink toward that first deep quiet, You may notice the breath lengthening again, without instruction now, without thought. You may notice how easy it is to drift when nothing pulls at you. You may notice how natural it feels to move toward a story that begins before all stories, in the old waters that carried heaven and earth while they were still only dreams. Now imagine that the darkness behind your eyes is no longer the darkness of a room. It has become something wider, softer, more alive. It is not empty blackness, but a vast blue dark hush, warm and deep, as though you are floating in waters that existed before the first shore. There is no up or down here that you need to know. No ceiling, no floor, no edge where one thing ends and another begins. There is only suspension, a gentle holding, and the faint sense that all future things are sleeping around you in secret. The water is calm in a way that calms you in return. Not cold, not bright, just endless and patient if you could listen closely to it. You might hear not sound exactly, but a kind of ancient humming, the quiet music of possibility before it becomes form. Beneath you, above you, all around you, the same slow cradle. No roads, no towers, no names, no dust yet rising under footsteps. No stars spread across the heavens, because the heavens themselves have not been lifted into place. Only this immeasurable deep breathing without lungs, resting without sleep. In such a place, there is nothing to resist. Your thoughts need not travel anywhere. They can simply drift and dissolve. Let them move away from you like little rings widening over still water. Let each concern of waking life become smaller, then smaller still, until it is only a glimmer fading into the distance. Here, the old stories say, creation had not yet become separate from rest. Being and dreaming were almost the same thing. The world had not begun to speak loudly. It was still listening to itself. You do not have to picture every detail sharply. In fact, it is better if you do not. Let the images stay soft. Let them gather at the edge of understanding, half seen and gentle. A darkness full of warmth, a sea with no shore, a silence that somehow feels full. This is enough. Sleep listens best when the mind is not forced into clarity. And within that broad stillness, you may begin to feel another kind of presence. Not frightening, not sudden, only immense, as though the waters are not merely water, after all, but living depth. As though the quiet itself is inhabited, as though beneath the drifting hush, two vast and ancient beings are resting together in the first embrace of existence. They have no temples yet, no priests have spoken for them, no poet has shaped them into verse, but they are there all the same, before language, before law, before sky. One is the sweet water hidden in springs and secret channels, clear and bright, and inwardly still. The other is the dark salt sea, wide and fertile, deep enough to cradle storms that have not yet found their wind. They do not move as creatures move later in the world. They are more like currents with thought inside them, forces with memory before memory. They mingle, they rest together, and because they are together, the first stirring of life begins. Stay in the water a little longer before that beginning ripples outward. Feel how safe it is to be held by something older than thought. Feel how little is required of you here. There is no need to remember facts or dates or names. All that matters is rhythm now, the pace of the breath, the sway of the dark, the low, patient pulse of a story preparing itself to unfold. Soon there will be light. Soon there will be voices. Soon there will be children of the deep, and one among them whose destiny will reach farther than the rest. But not yet. For now, simply float in the first sea. Let it hold your weight. Let it take from you the last bright edges of the day. Let the room around you vanish completely, and the ancient waters keep watch. Because this is how the world begins tonight. Not with noise, but with tenderness. Not with command, but with mingling. Not with sharp lines, but with a soft and endless before. In the old Babylonian imagining, those first immensities were not abstract principles but presences. Apsu, lord of the sweet subterranean waters, and Tiamat, mother of the salt sea, ancient and unbounded. Yet even to call them lord and mother is already to speak from a later world, a world of households and rulers and boundaries. Here at the beginning, they are simpler and stranger than any title can fully hold. Apsu is the clear hidden depth from which freshness rises. Tiamat is the dark generative vastness whose embrace contains every future shore. They are not standing apart from creation. They are creation in its earliest living mood. The waters of Apsu and Tiamat mingle without urgency. They do not rush to produce a world. They simply rest together, and out of that resting, motion begins. The first younger beings emerge not with trumpets, not with sudden brilliance, but the way bubbles rise through stillness from unseen depths. A little shimmer, a little pulse, a little more shape than there had been before. The earliest children of the deep arrive, like thoughts becoming visible. At first, the changes are so delicate that the first sea hardly seems altered. Yet, little by little, the calm, broad silence begins to develop texture. Where once there was only undivided dark, now there are hints of relation. Near and far, above and below, quiet intervals between sounds not yet fully made. The first generations of divine life drift within the waters like pale lamps, not yet lit to their fullest brightness. Lamu and Lahamu, early forms of silt and mist, earthiness and softness, presence without solid ground. Then others after them, more defined, more expansive, bearing within themselves the possibility of horizon and sky. The old deep, which had once known only itself, becomes a cradle crowded with wonder. And wonder, even when beautiful, has movement in it. The young gods are not solemn the way their elders are solemn. They are curious. Their delight stirs the waters, their voices, if voices they can yet be called, begin to ripple through the dark. The cosmos, which had been one long unbroken breath, now takes in smaller breaths inside itself. A liveliness enters the deep. Imagine them there as bright young currents racing through the great salt dark sea, circling one another, laughing in ways that are more like vibration than sound. They do not yet understand silence as a thing that can be treasured. They have only just arrived, and arrival itself feels glorious to them. They move where no movement has ever been. They call to one another in the first language of wonder. They make the stillness ring, and because they are young, they do not know that joy can trouble those who were shaped by a different kind of peace. Apsu, who had known the old quiet longer than time could have counted it, feels the brightness of the younger gods as a disturbance in his depths. At first it is only a faint discomfort, the way a sleeper might stir when a breeze lifts a curtain. Then it grows. Their play ripples through the sweet waters. Their motions cross the old calm. Their songs reach places where once there had been only silence folded inside silence. Apsu does not hate them at once. Weariness comes first, then yearning, then the difficult thought that what has begun may need to be undone. Tiamat is slower to move toward such a thought. She feels the motions of the younger gods as any ancient mother might feel the restlessness of children. At times overwhelming, at times bewildering, yet also dear. Their noise is part of her own body. After all, their rising is born from her vastness. She cannot easily turn against what has emerged from her. So where Apsu grows rigid with desire for the old stillness, Tiamat remains divided, her immense heart holding affection and unease at once. This is one of the quiet powers of the old myth. Even at the beginning of conflict, no one is merely simple. The first fracture in creation is not caused by pure evil arriving from nowhere. It comes from incompatible hungers, from the elder longing for silence and the younger hunger for movement, from the difficult truth that every beginning changes what came before it. As you listen, let that thought remain gentle. There is no need to sharpen it into judgment. Let it pass through you, like the slow crossing of shadow under water. The world is becoming more complex, yes, but complexity need not wake you. It can move slowly, it can drift, it can be held inside rhythm. And while the younger gods continue in their brightness, and while Apsu grows more troubled in the old deep, the shape of destiny begins to gather in secret around them. For whenever silence is broken, something new must emerge. Not only conflict, but the possibility of a different order, a new way for the world to breathe. Apsu withdraws into thought. In the beginning, thought itself is a kind of landscape, and his darkening thoughts spread through the waters like cold currents beneath a warmer surface. He remembers the old silence not merely as absence, but as perfection. He remembers a peace so complete that even longing had not yet been born within it. To him, the younger gods feel less like children and more like the undoing of that first completeness. Their delight presses upon him day after timeless day, and because there are not yet days in any mortal sense, there is no natural interval in which irritation might loosen. It can only deepen. At last he speaks of what he wants. He speaks not in the tone of thunder, because thunder does not yet belong to the world, but in a voice broad and low enough to move the foundations of the deep. He tells Tiamat that he wishes the younger ones to be quiet forever. He wishes to sink them back into the dark from which they rose. He wishes to recover the unbroken stillness that once belonged to him. His desire is terrible, yet beneath it lies exhaustion more than rage, a great old weariness unable to imagine any peace except the peace of return. Tiamat listens. The waters listen with her. If grief had already been possible in the first sea, perhaps she would have felt it then. These bright young beings are of her. Their laughter, their restlessness, their foolish beauty, all of it has grown under her vast protection. She cannot bless the end that Apsu imagines, yet neither can she wholly soothe the injury he feels. So she does what many hearts do when caught between love and loss. She delays. She does not agree, and she does not strike against him. She lets the waters hold the unresolved sorrow. But in a cosmos where every sound carries, delay is not secrecy. Words spoken in the deep seldom remain in one place. Among the younger gods is Ea, subtle in mind, patient in attention, a being who does not merely hear words but senses the intention beneath them. Where others race and brighten and scatter themselves in delight, Ea listens. He dwells close to thought, close to craft, close to the hidden currents that pass beneath appearance. And so the murmur of Apsu's plan reaches him. Ea does not answer panic with panic. That is not his way. He goes inward, the way the wise often do in the presence of danger. He considers, he studies the shape of what must be done. He understands that the first great conflict cannot be met by shouting or by sheer force. The old deep still belongs too much to Apsu and Tiamat for such bluntness. Instead, Ea turns to the one art powerful enough to move through the oldest waters without tearing them apart. The art of sacred speech, of patterned sound, of spell and stillness. Imagine him now in a chamber, not yet built from stone, for stone still sleeps inside possibility. Imagine instead a place made of concentration itself, a clearing of thought in the dark sea. There Ea gathers words before language, weaving them with the care of someone braiding moonlight through a net. Each phrase cools the water, each measured sound settles the currents. He does not shout against Apsu. He surrounds him. He wraps the weary elder in enchantment, the way night wraps a field. Sleep comes upon Apsu not as punishment, but as an overwhelming tide of forgetting. The old god who longed for silence is drawn into a silence deeper than even he had sought. The tensions of his vast mind loosen, his movements cease. The bright younger gods are spared, and the first crisis passes not with clashing weapons, but with a great settling, a quieting, a descent into dream. Yet no action, even one taken to preserve life, leaves the waters unchanged. The old order has been broken. The children have acted against the Father of stillness. A threshold has been crossed from which the cosmos will not return. Ea, knowing that the world has shifted beneath him, establishes his dwelling in the deep where Apsu's power had lain. He makes for himself a sanctuary of wisdom, a hidden royal place, formed out of victory, caution, and thought. And there, within that protected center, something unexpected occurs. Not merely safety, not merely respite, a new beginning. With Damkina, gentle and grounding, a presence of fertile earthliness amid the endless water, Ea brings forth a child. This child does not enter the world as the others had done, simply one more brightness among many. From the first moment, there is a strange completeness about him, as if several futures have converged into a single form. The waters seem to pause around him. The dark itself seems to regard him. He has not yet spoken. He has not yet risen to his destiny. Yet already, one feels that the balance of the cosmos has changed again. For in the wake of danger, in the quiet chamber carved from the deep, Marduk is born. There are births that seem only to add one more life to the world, and there are births that alter the shape of attention itself. Marduk's coming belongs to the second kind. Nothing in the deep is loud at first, yet everything is subtly rearranged by his presence. The chamber of Ea feels larger with him in it. The darkness around him holds more light than it had before. Even the currents, which answer to no infant, move with unusual gentleness as though making room. The old stories later imagined marvels around him, multiple eyes to see farther, multiple ears to hear what others missed, a radiance not easily contained, a strength that had not yet been tested but already seemed inevitable. Whether we picture those wonders literally or as the language of awe, the feeling is the same. He is not merely powerful, he is attentive in a way that power rarely is. He does not enter the world as a storm that must be feared. He enters as a center around which things begin, almost gratefully, to arrange themselves. As he grows, growth in the realm of gods is not marked by years, the way mortals will later count them. It is marked by awakenings, by the unfolding of capacities, by one layer of being opening into another. Marduk learns the movement of the waters before he ever commands the wind. He listens before he speaks. He studies before he acts. If the younger gods around him still carry something of youth's brightness and carelessness, Marduk carries another temperament entirely. His energy does not scatter, it gathers. He notices what others rush past. He hears what others overlook. He feels tensions forming in the deep long before they sharpen into visible trouble. He is curious, but not restless. He is brilliant, but not showy. He seems to understand from very early on that force, without form means little, and that form, without patience, cannot endure. The hidden lessons of Ea and the grounding tenderness of Damkina shape him into something rare. A being in whom intelligence and presence, movement and steadiness seem perfectly paired. You might imagine him walking through halls of thought and cloud, though halls and clouds are still only half-born. You might imagine him touching the edges of things not yet finished and sensing how they might one day be made complete. The future mountain sleeps in the deep. He feels its heaviness. The future wind has not yet learned to roam. He feels its restlessness. Fire hides like a secret in the body of possibility. He senses its bright hunger. The universe is a scattered set of sleeping powers, and Marduk, still young, seems able to hear them murmuring in their sleep. The other gods watch him with that peculiar mixture of affection and caution reserved for those who seem marked by destiny. They are drawn to him, but they do not fully know how to measure him. Around him, jokes fall quiet a little sooner. Gestures become more considered. Even delight takes on a new gravity. as though his presence asks the world to become more itself. This does not mean he is severe. There is warmth in him, but it is not careless warmth. It is the warmth of a hearth rather than a spark. One can imagine him smiling, yet even the smile would seem to carry the outline of command. Not command used against others, but command waiting for the day when it must gather chaos and turn it toward meaning. As he matures, curious signs ripple outward. Waters part more readily where he passes. Unformed winds seem to circle him in play. Light catches in the dim like a promise. None of this is announced. No herald calls the cosmos to attention. No herald calls the cosmos. It is simply felt, the way one feels a change in weather before the sky has visibly altered. And still, for a little while, there is peace. Not the old peace of absolute stillness, for that can never be restored, but another peace, more intricate and more fragile. The peace of a world that has survived its first fracture and is not yet broken again. In this interval, Marduk grows into himself, and the possibility of balance grows with him. Yet elsewhere in the deep, another growth is taking place. Tiamat, who once held every beginning with open vastness, has not forgotten Apsu. The great sleep laid upon him by Ea has not vanished from memory. If the younger gods continue in their brightness, they do so upon a wound. For what the children called survival, the ancient mother may still feel as violation. She has delayed her judgment. Yes, she has held back, but grief, if left alone too long in darkness, seldom remains merely grief. In the wide chambers of the sea, where no torch burns and no star yet reaches, Tiamat begins to change. At first her grief is almost indistinguishable from stillness. Tiamat does not lash out immediately. She sinks deeper into herself. And in that sinking, the waters around her become heavy with memory. She remembers the first calm she shared with Apsu before laughter entered the deep. She remembers the mingling from which the younger gods arose. She remembers, too, the helplessness of hearing that the old order had been overturned, that the father of fresh waters had been cast into enchanted sleep by those who had come after him. In an early world where there is little law but relation, such a wound does not heal neatly. It rolls outward through everything. Her sorrow takes on shape, not all at once, more like the slow turning of a tide under the moon, though the moon has not yet been hung. She withdraws from the younger gods, from their brightness, from their careless continuation, and because she is vast, her withdrawal is not small. Whole regions of the deep seem dimmer, currents slow. The sea gathers around her like a cloak of old hurt. Then sorrow hardens. It hardens, not because she ceases to love, but because love, denied an answer, sometimes turns into something more severe. The mother who once held all beginnings now begins to imagine endings. The sea that once cradled life begins to remember that it can also swallow. Tiamat's grief puts on armor of scale and claw and venom, not because she herself becomes less grand, but because pain, when shaped into symbols, often chooses the language of monsters. From the dark salt immensities she brings forth beings that do not resemble the younger gods in their brightness. These new creatures are dense with omen and fevered purpose. Serpents long as rivers, horned things with eyes like coals hidden under ash. Dragon forms whose breath seems made of poison mist and old curses. Shadow lions, storm dogs, winged terrors born from fury and salt. They arrive not laughing, not curious, but ready. Each one is a cry from the wounded, deep-given body. If you wish, imagine them not too sharply. Let them remain dream creatures at a distance, shapes moving behind mist. This is still a sleep story, and even the dark parts need not cut too deeply. They are frightening, mainly because of what they represent. Grief that has learned to act. And above all these newly made powers, Tiamat chooses one to stand nearest her. Kingu, strong, proud, close enough to the mother's rage to be kindled by it. To him, She gives not only favor, but authority. Upon his chest, she places the tablet of destiny, the ancient sign that power may shape what is and what shall be. With that gift, he becomes more than companion, more than champion. He becomes the visible bearer of a claim that the deep mother, not the bright young gods, should decide the fate of the cosmos. News of this does not spread as rumor spreads in mortal cities. It moves more like pressure before a storm. The younger gods feel it before they fully understand it. They sense the sea changing its mind. They feel danger gather in layers. Joy becomes thinner among them. Conversations shorten. The easy confidence of those who had once filled the deep with play begins to drain away. One by one, they turn toward the elder powers who should know what to do. Toward Anu, toward Enlil, toward Ea, toward every figure whose name carries weight. Yet, knowledge is not the same as courage, and age is not always certainty. The gods who can speak most wisely of the threat do not hurry to meet it. Tiamat is no minor enemy. She is the sea from which they came. To face her is not like facing a stranger. It is like standing against the oldest source of one's own being. So the heavens gather in unease. Imagine, if you like, a high divine hall suspended where sky will one day be. No carved cedar yet, no brick, no lapis walls, yet already something of architecture in the arrangement of power. Pillars of light, open vastness instead of roof, the younger gods assembling not with the boldness of warriors, but with the anxious formality of a family that has reached the limits of avoidance. Their voices are subdued. Their glances move outward again and again toward the dark edge where Tiamat's forces are forming. Here the old myth shows another quiet truth. Fear does not always make beings loud. Sometimes it makes them ceremonial. Sometimes the more frightened a council is, the more carefully it arranges itself into dignity. The names spoken in that gathering carry gravity, but gravity alone cannot save a world. One by one, the gods measure the threat and find themselves unwilling. They can describe the Sea Mother's power. They can name the horror of the monsters she has raised. They can speak of the tablet resting on Kingu's chest. But none of them steps forward the stillness required. None of them sounds like the future until another presence enters the hall. He does not rush. He does not demand silence, because silence arrives of its own accord when he appears. Marduk comes among them, no longer as the child in Ea's chamber, but as a young power fully aware of the burden the cosmos is trying to place somewhere. He listens before he speaks. He lets their fear reveal itself. He lets the hall feel the shape of its own helplessness. Only then does he offer what none of the others can. He says, in effect, that he will go, not carelessly, not for display, not simply to strike down an enemy. He will go if the world truly asks it of him. He will go if the gods are prepared to give him the authority to shape what comes after the conflict. He understands what they half understand. This is not merely a question of winning. If Tiamat rises and is met, the universe itself will need to be reordered. Someone must bear not only courage, but consequence. The hall hears in him something that has been missing from all its deliberations. Calm that does not retreat, power that does not boast, willingness without frenzy. Hope, that strange younger sibling of fear, enters the gathering at last. And yet, even hope must be formalized in a cosmos built by sacred speech. The gods are not ready simply to cheer him onward before the storm-bearer can face the deep. The heavens must decide what kind of king they are willing to make. What follows is not the noisy acclamation of a desperate crowd. It is stranger and more beautiful than that. The divine assembly, fearful though it is, understands that authority in the earliest world cannot be tossed like a spear from one hand to another. It must be spoken into being. It must be witnessed. It must be accepted by all who will live beneath it. So the gods begin to shape a covenant around Marduk. If you imagine a crown of hammered gold, set it aside for now. The honor they offer him is older than jewels. They gather their powers in symbols that are still close to elements. Wind, flame, speech, measure, reach. They call upon every region of the forming cosmos to witness the choice they are making. The hall brightens, as though the future itself were leaning in to listen. Marduk stands at the center, not basking in their attention, but receiving it with grave restraint. He knows, perhaps better than they do, that once power is given in full, it becomes difficult ever to set down. To shape the world is also to be bound to it. To answer fear with command is to inherit the exhaustion of everything that follows. Yet he does not step back. He lets the burden come, one by one. The gods give what they can. Anu lends the breadth of heaven. Ea lays subtle wisdom, like clear water, at Marduk's feet. Others bring endurance, measure, flame, far-seeing sight, and the steadiness that keeps worlds from wandering loose. Their offerings gather around him until he seems less a single figure than a lone, bright meeting place for ordered things, the calm center toward which many powers lean. Still, even in desperation, the old gods are not careless. A ruler over chaos must be tested. A voice that hopes to shape the world must demonstrate that it can command more than admiration. So they set before Marduk not an army and not an enemy, but a simpler trial, almost delicate in appearance. A garment, a woven thing, suspended in the divine air. A small object in a vast hall. The test is not whether he can tear it, but whether word itself bends to his intention. Marduk looks upon it as though the answer had always been waiting. He speaks, and the garment is gone, not destroyed with violence, not ripped, not burned, simply absent, as though it had obeyed a deeper instruction and slipped for a moment beyond the visible world. The hall grows still, then he speaks again, and the garment returns, whole, untouched, perfectly itself. This is not a trick in the mortal sense. It is revelation. The gods understand what they have seen. Power over the word means power over form. Power over form means the possibility of world-making. What vanished and returned at his speech was not merely cloth, but the old question of whether the cosmos has found its proper voice. Now their ascent becomes complete. The covenant closes around Marduk like a second atmosphere. The net of containment, subtle and far-reaching, is given into his care. The winds, or the promise of winds, gather at his command. The bow belongs to him, not as ornament, but as directed purpose. Flame glints at the edges of his authority. The very architecture of future order seems to align around the one standing in the hall. And through all this, the mood does not become loud. There is grandeur, yes, but grandeur of a ceremonial kind. The kind that invites the breath to slow rather than quicken. Imagine ancient hymns too low to be fully heard. Imagine currents of light winding around Marduk's arms. Imagine the assembly not jubilant exactly, but relieved in a solemn, almost tearful way, as though at last the world has found someone willing to hold its heaviest uncertainty. He accepts the charge. No proud declaration follows, no triumphant laugh, only the sense of a threshold crossed. In that moment, Marduk ceases to be merely promising. He becomes necessary, and yet before he descends to meet the Sea Mother, let the story rest here for a little while, in the strange calm that comes just before great action. This calm matters. In sleep stories, as in life, the heart needs a place to settle after the weight of decision. So imagine the hall emptying slowly. Imagine the gifts of authority still warm around him. Imagine the cosmos pausing, as if all things have taken one long breath in and are waiting to see what form the exhale will make. Beyond the bounds of that luminous gathering, Tiamat still rises. Her creatures still move in the dark. Kingu still carries destiny on his chest, as though the future were already claimed. But here, In the brief hush before descent, there is a different feeling. Not fear, not certainty, but readiness. A readiness so deep that it almost feels like peace. This is one of the hidden treasures of the old tale. The hero's power is not most beautiful when it strikes. It is most beautiful when it stands composed before the strike, when it gathers itself without excess, when it knows the cost and remain. Soon the sea and the storm will meet, but first the stars, not yet fully lit, lean closer in silence to watch. Marduk moves toward the deep, not like a conqueror racing toward glory, but like weather taking its appointed shape. The powers entrusted to him do not clatter, they gather. The winds coil close, waiting for their names. The net rests with a quiet tensile strength, woven not merely to trap, but to define a boundary where chaos must answer. The bow shines with a patient severity, and within him, steadier than all these instruments, lies the word that has already shown itself capable of making absence and return. As he descends, the regions between heaven and sea seem to reveal themselves for the first time. The world is not yet fully world, yet already there is contrast. A high brightness thinning into dark, a dark thickening into moving depth, a threshold where future sky will one day lean over future water. Marduk crosses that threshold in composure. Nothing about him is hurried. To hear the story well, it helps to feel that slowness. He is not running toward a duel. He is entering the center of an unfinished cosmos to decide what kind of place it will become. Below him, Tiamat rises in majesty and grief. Let us be careful here not to flatten her into a mere monster. For the old tale is more powerful when we remember what she is. She is rage, yes. She is danger, yes. But she is also the first vast mother. The dark sea that held every beginning, the injured source whose sorrow has become world-threatening. Her enormity is not only physical, it is emotional, elemental, ancestral. When she rises, the deep remembers itself. Around her move the creatures shaped from pain. They twist through vapor and black water like the bad dreams of a universe not yet settled. Behind and around them, currents convulse. The line between sea and storm dissolves near her. Kingu bears the tablet of destinies with the stern pride of one who believes the future has chosen his side. No shout breaks the dark, no reckless rush disturbs the ancient sea. The moment widens instead, storm faces sea, breath faces breath. Around them the silence becomes so complete that even the farthest stars seem to wait before they burn again. Marduk does not insult Tiamat. He does not waste breath on boast or mockery. He faces her as one power faces another, and the cosmos listens through them both. One may imagine words passing between them, old claims and old injuries, spoken at last into the dark. Why should the children inherit what they did not make? Why should ancient grief bow before younger order? Why should the sea surrender to the storm? The questions tremble under the surface of what is about to happen. Then Tiamat opens herself to strike. In that instant, Marduk releases the first of the gathered wind. They rush forward not as mere weather, but as directional will. East, west, north, south, every reach of future world meeting the ancient sea at once. They pour to the great mother's vastness and keep pouring, filling her, checking her motion, expanding the moment between intention and devouring. The old chaos that could once have swallowed all begins to meet resistance from pattern, from limit, from shape. Ike. The scene is immense, but notice how even here the imagery can remain rhythmic. Wind entering water, motion meeting mass, space opening inside pressure. There is struggle, yes, but struggle told as cosmic choreography, not as panic. Tiamat surges, Marduk answers. The net holds the field of encounter. The storm gathers at its appointed edges. The monsters cry out from behind their mother, but their voices do not dominate. The center belongs to the greater meeting. Then comes the arrow. He draws the bow not in wrath, but in absolute concentration. The string becomes a line between worlds, between what has been and what can be. When he releases, the shot travels straight into the heart of the unbounded sea, not as cruelty for its own sake, not as delight in destruction. It is the stroke by which formlessness is stopped from consuming all later form. It is the sorrowful necessity at the center of the myth. Tiamat falls, and the remarkable thing is not that the story invites triumph. It does not, at least not here. The remarkable thing is how quickly the old violence gives way to hush. After the cry, after the shock, after the breaking of the ancient motion, a great stillness returns, not the original stillness of before everything, but another kind, a silence earned by passage through danger. The sea settles around the fallen mother. The monstrous host loses its central force. Kingu's borrowed certainty begins to fail. Marduk does not stand over her in exultation. This matters deeply. He approaches what has fallen with reverence, for he knows what the gods in their fear could almost forget, that from Tiamat all the younger powers once emerged. To despise her would be to despise origin itself, and so the victor's first true act is not celebration, but understanding. He looks upon the great body of the Sea Mother and sees not only what had to be opposed, but what may still be transformed. This is where the tale reveals its oldest wisdom. The answer to chaos is not mere annihilation. The answer is shaping. The answer is taking what is vast and wounded and dangerous and giving it boundary, purpose, relation. The answer is making a world so as the deep grows quiet under the watch of the new king, and as the first terrible encounter subsides into possibility, the story itself softens. The battle has spent its energy. The listener may rest again. Let the breath return to its slower rhythm. Let the mind unclench. The sharpest wave has passed, and in the hush after conflict, Marduk begins the gentler labor for which the struggle existed at all. With care that seems almost tender after such magnitude, Marduk sets himself to the making of structure. The old deep, once whole and undivided, cannot remain as it was. The cosmos needs relation now. It needs distance, direction, shelter, rhythm, and so, from what had been the vast body of Tiamat, he begins to draw the lines of a world. Imagine not gore, not tearing in any harsh mortal sense, but a solemn unfolding of hidden forms. What was once unbounded becomes parted into above and below. One great reach is lifted and spread into the arch that will hold the sky. Another is laid out as foundation for the earth that future feet will know. This is not a craftsman working with dead material. It is a god of forming order, listening to what each portion of the old chaos can become when guided into place. He fastens the heights so that they do not collapse back into sea. He sets limits where there had been none, and those limits are beautiful because they make room for everything later. Boundary is not punishment here. Boundary is generosity, because the sky is held apart. Birds may one day cross it. Because the earth is steadied, grain may one day grow. Because the waters are gathered and given channels, rivers may one day tell stories to cities. From the Sea Mother's eyes come the first flowing paths, the great rivers that will later nourish lands and carry reeds and trade and songs. One may imagine them already as the deep memory of the Tigris and Euphrates, though the names need not be spoken too heavily. It is enough to feel water becoming journey, becoming route, becoming life shared between distant places. From her breath come moving airs. From her ribs and depths rise the possibilities of high places, ridges, and mountain bones. Her unboundedness, once dangerous, now lends grandeur to the world being shaped. Marduk orders the heavens with equal patience. The stars, not yet fully appointed, are set into their paths like luminous measures. The great lights will one day keep time for seed and harvest, for ceremony and rest, for shepherd and sailor and priest. The moon is given its cycle. The sun its course, constellations take their places, like inscriptions written across the night, not only for beauty, but for pattern, for remembrance, for the comfort that comes when the sky repeats itself faithfully above human uncertainty. This too is part of sleep's golden treasure. Pattern calms. The mind rests more easily under a sky that returns. The heart settles in a world where dawn follows night, and night follows day, and the moon keeps its old appointments. In the myth, Marduk is not only strong because he can defeat, he is beloved because he can arrange repetition, and repetition is one of the kindest gifts in a fragile life. The lesser powers of disorder are also dealt with, though even here the tale need not linger in harshness. Some are subdued and assigned their places at the margins. Some are hidden in shadow where they can trouble but not rule. Some become warnings, woven into the edges of creation, reminders that not all wildness is gone and perhaps should not be. For a world entirely without wildness would be lifeless. Order does not erase mystery. It frames it. Kingu, stripped at last of the tablet he wore like borrowed fate, is brought low. Yet even this is not the final note of punishment. The myth has another transformation waiting, another turn from severity toward purpose. The deep still holds resources for future making. The old rebellion, too, will become ingredient rather than waste. Pause here and look, in the imagination's soft way, upon the world as it now begins to appear. Above, a sky no longer drowned in water, broad and held. Below, an earth no longer formless, capable of carrying weight. Between them, winds moving along the land, rivers threading silver paths overhead, lights set into recurring order. The first true spaces of dwelling have opened. There is relief in such making. Perhaps you can feel it in your own body as you listen. After all the earlier tensions, the noise of the younger gods, the anger of Apsu, the grief of Tiamat, the fearful council, the meeting of storm and sea, this section of the story invites the nervous system to unfasten. We are no longer waiting for danger to crest. We are watching a world become inhabitable, and because it is becoming inhabitable, it is also becoming intimate. A formed world asks a new question, not how it may survive its origins, but who will walk within it? Who will stand beneath these measured stars and notice them? Who will tend the earth, cross the rivers, build the hearths, raise the songs? Who will remember that the sky was won from danger, and that order came not cheaply, but through wisdom steady enough to bear sorrow? Marduk, having shaped the shelter, now turns to the beings who will live inside it. The gods, now safer in a world newly ordered, feel another truth pressing upon them. Creation, once established, requires tending. The heavens may keep their courses, but altars will not raise themselves. Fields will not gather themselves into harvest. Cities will not dream themselves into being. Hymns will not rise from silence unless there are mouths to sing them. The work of a cosmos is not finished when its boundaries are set. In many ways, that is only the beginning. The divine assembly turns again toward Marduk, and in their turning, there is both gratitude and weariness. They have been frightened, they have been rescued, they long for rest, yet rest, to last, must be supported by hands other than their own. They ask who will care for the ordered world, who will shoulder the tasks that are too small for gods, and yet too necessary to be left undone. Marduk considers this in the same spirit with which he faced all the earlier questions, not hurriedly, not with vanity, but with inward attention. He knows that a world of rivers and stars and seasons deserves witnesses. It deserves creatures able to look up, to marvel, to labor, to remember. Not gods who live too close to power, not beasts alone who live too close to instinct, something between earth and breath, burden and wonder. So he turns to what remains available in the aftermath of rebellion. Kingu's blood, once marked by defiance, and by false assumption of destiny, still carries force. Clay from the young earth carries steadiness, weight, nearness to the formed world. Breath carries animation, warmth, inwardness. None of these by itself is enough. Together, they become the ingredients of a new kind of being. Imagine Marduk kneeling beside a riverbank, under a sky only recently appointed. The clay is damp and patient in his hands. He does not shape armies, he shapes vulnerability, a brow that may furrow in thought, hands that may build but also tremble, eyes that may look on beauty and not fully understand why tears rise, a chest that must breathe in order to live, a mind capable of remembering stories long after voices fall silent. Into this earthen form, the old myth says, he brings living force. And humanity begins, not with fanfare, not with immediate empire, simply with awakening, the first human beings opening their eyes beneath a sky that is already larger than they can comprehend. Their feet touching ground, made firm by a God's ordering hand. Their lungs learning the rhythm of air, their hearts beating with a strange mingling of fragility and purpose. The beauty of this old image lies partly in its humility. Humans are not made from gold or starlight alone. They are shaped from clay, from earth that stains and cracks and needs water. They come from something low, tangible, ordinary, yet mixed into that ordinariness is memory of rebellion, a dangerous freedom, and the breath that lets consciousness shine through matter. This is why human life in so many myths feels both noble and difficult. We are made close to the ground, yet full of longing that rises upward. Marduk does not make these new beings simply to serve like silent tools. The deeper tenderness of the story suggests something more reciprocal. Yes, they will take up labor. They will maintain temples, fields, households, and right. They will lift offerings and prayers. They will ease the burdens of the gods, but they will also inherit the privilege of participation in an ordered world. They will know dawn. They will know the scent of wet soil after river flooding. They will know song. They will love. They will grieve. They will pass stories from one voice to another so that memory becomes a second home. In this sense, humanity is born not just to work, but to witness. Let that idea move through the script like a hidden lamp. It softens the myth beautifully. The first people are those who can stand beneath the stars and understand, however dimly, that they are standing inside a shaped gift. They become the answer to the loneliness of a beautiful world. Without them, the rivers would still run and the moon would still turn, but no one would tell the tale of how order arose from the sea. No one would kneel in gratitude or stand in awe. No one would remember Marduk, not merely as a victor, but as the one who made dwelling possible. And what does a newly awakened humanity do first? Perhaps not what later empires do. Perhaps before ambition and conquest and pride have had time to thicken, they do what all creatures fresh from wonder do. They look, they touch, they listen, they taste the air, they feel the ground, they turn their faces upward to the broad arranged sky and sense, without having words for it yet, that they are inside a mystery. There is a return to safety in this section that matters for the overall rhythm. After cosmic tension and elemental reshaping, the story has descended into something intimate and close to the body. Breath, clay, hands, eyes opening. This closeness is restful. It lets the listener move from scale to tenderness. It lets the great myth settle into the size of a human life. And from these first lives, slowly, patiently, the next layer of the tale begins. Memory becoming culture, gratitude becoming ritual, shelter becoming city. Time, once scarcely more than the difference between stillness and movement, begins now to gather itself into rhythm. Days pass beneath the measured sun, nights return under the appointed stars. The moon thins and rounds and thins again, Seasons teach the rivers when to swell and the fields when to answer. Human beings, still young in the world, learn by repetition. They learn how seed responds to soil. They learn how water may nourish and also destroy. They learn how to shape reeds, how to form bricks, how to read the temper of weather by the sky's color and the animal hush before wind. As generations lengthen, memory thickens into custom. A place by the river becomes a settlement, then a larger settlement, then a city where labor and longing meet. Walls rise, courtyards open, ovens glow at dawn. Children run through dust the color of warm bread. Oxen drag their slow strength across the edges of fields. Potters turn wet earth into vessels that will hold oil, grain, beer, and water. Scribes press wedge-shaped marks into clay, teaching memory how to survive the death of a voice. Among the cities of the plain, one begins to gather unusual significance. Babylon. At first, perhaps it is only another place where people wait, work, bargain, dream, and sleep beneath the broad Mesopotamian sky. But gradually, it draws toward itself a different density of meaning. Trade routes cross there, ambitions settle there, ritual concentrates there. The city becomes not just a habitation of bodies, but a habitation of remembrance. For if human beings were made to witness, then witnessing asks for form. It asks for gestures repeated until they become offerings. It asks for places where gratitude may rise without embarrassment. It asks for architecture capable of holding awe. And so in Babylon, the memory of Marduk, already preserved in stories and in the ordered sky itself, begins to gather stone around it. Imagine workers carrying baked bricks in the heat of afternoon, their feet powdered with dust, their shoulders shining with effort. Imagine master builders checking alignment against string and shadow. Imagine blue glaze prepared with care, bitumen smelled in warm air, reeds and timber, and carved fittings arriving from distances along the river. A temple does not appear all at once. It is lifted piece by patient piece by many hands, most of whose names will never be preserved. That, too, is fitting. A city remembers its gods through the labor of ordinary people. Layer by layer, the sacred structure rises, a platform first, steady and broad, then another level above it, then another. Each stage reaching upward with the grave confidence of a mountain made by human intention. Steps ascend, chambers are prepared, walls receive color, lion forms, star signs, sacred motifs, all begin to appear as if the city were teaching clay and glaze to dream of heaven. In time, the shrine at the summit waits for light, incense, song, and attentive silence. To later eyes, the ziggurat may seem like architecture. To those within the story, it is more than that. It is memory turned vertical. It is a stair between daily life and cosmic order. It says to everyone who sees it that the world was not always settled, that the sky above and the earth below were once uncertain, and that between those immensities stands a bond. The bond is made of ritual, of gratitude, of story retold often enough that it becomes the atmosphere of a people. Listen to Babylon in the early morning, before heat rises hard from the ground. The city is all soft gray gold. Doves turn on ledges, river mist lifts slowly. From courtyards comes the smell of bread beginning. A priest or singer climbs temple steps, while shadows still lie long and cool. Oil lamps gutter in blue pre-dawn chambers. Somewhere a mother smooths a child's hair and murmurs an old story of the first sea. The bright younger gods, the wounded mother, the storm bearer who made order from danger. The child may not understand every name. That does not matter. Understanding is not the only vessel of memory. Repetition is another. Tone is another. Love is another. At festivals, the city grows louder. Yes, but even then, beneath the music and procession lies the calmer truth that Marduk represents. He is invoked not only because he is strong, but because he is steady. He is honored because the river still comes, the stars still return. The fields still answer, the walls still stand. Every ordinary continuation of life is, in some quiet sense, a liturgy to order. And in that long remembering, the city learns where comfort truly lives. Not in the noise of triumph, but in what follows afterward. In the river returning to its banks, in walls that hold through the night, in fields that answer the season, in lamps relit at dusk, in the quiet certainty that the stars will come back to their places, and that the world, once shaped, may be trusted for another day. So the city builds, and in building it teaches itself what to trust. Trust the river, though watch it carefully. Trust the seasons, though honor them properly. Trust the measured heavens. Trust the walls. Trust the rites that return each year. Trust the story that says the world can be repaired, shaped, and held. At the center of this trust stands the name of Marduk, but the name is not shouted constantly. Often, it is present the way a foundation is present. Seldom looked at directly, always carrying weight. In the hush before prayer, in the smoke of incense rising straight upward, in the solemn recitation of old lines, in the confidence with which a builder lays one brick upon another, the god's memory continues its work. And when evening comes, and the heat leaves the walls, and the upper chambers of Babylon open to the cooling night, the city looks upward once more to the stars he set in order, and remembers. Night in Babylon deserves its own telling. Day belongs to heat, transaction, and the practical intelligence of survival. But night belongs to memory. Once the last light thins from the baked walls, and the river turns from bronze to black silk, the city seems to remember that it was built under a sky older than all its markets and kings. Roofs cool, courtyards deepen in shadow, lamps appear in doorways like modest stars answering the greater ones above. From the temple precincts, chants may travel softly on the air. Not every household hears them clearly, yet nearly everyone feels their effect. The measured cadence of ritual joins the chirr of insects, the distant bark of a dog, the sleepy shifting of animals in their pens, the murmur of one last conversation on a roof where people have come to catch a breeze. Even the city noises at night seem arranged into gentler intervals. Babylon exhales, and in that exhale, the story of Marduk lives most naturally. Not always as an official proclamation, often as the kind of tale told when work is done, and darkness invites a voice to grow low. A grandfather speaking, while children lie on woven mats and watch the stars between rooflines. A temple singer, teaching novices how to let the old names move through the mouth without haste. A woman carrying water at dusk and hearing, in the river's patient flow, an echo of the first dividing of sea from land. Myth survives not only in monuments, but in repetitions small enough to enter daily life. One generation says to the next, "This ordered world did not come cheaply. The stars you trust were once unplaced. The fields you till were once unformed. The waters that feed us remember older vastness. So live carefully, live gratefully, build well, speak with respect in sacred places. Offer thanks when the flood recedes and when the grain rises. Do not forget that order is a gift requiring participation." These are not merely religious instructions, they are psychological shelter. To live in a river civilization is to know vulnerability intimately. Too little water and the fields fail, too much and homes wash away. Kings rise and fall, trade can flourish and then break, illness may come. Children may not survive every season. The old story of Marduk gives shape to uncertainty by saying that even chaos can be bounded. Even grief may be transformed. Even the deep can be given channels. For a people living close to contingency, this is not decorative theology. It is emotional architecture, and perhaps somewhere in the city, a scribe presses these memories into clay. The stylus moves carefully. Wedges line up in damp tablets that will harden in heat and outlast the hand that made them. There is something very moving about that image. A mortal pressing signs into earth, so that the deeds of gods will not be lost. Clay, remembering clay, the species formed from mud, now using mud to preserve meaning. In this way, the creation of humankind circles back upon itself beautifully. Humans were shaped to witness, and witness becomes inscription. When those tablets dry, they become more than records. They become vessels of continuity. Long after one voice is gone, another may trace the same signs and call the old events back into hearing. Long after a particular temple singer is dust, the hymn survives. Long after a child grows old, the city can still say the name of the one who shaped the heavens. There is comfort in that, not immortality exactly, but transmission, not escape from time, but a way of laying warmth into it. Let the mind rest here for a while in the ordinary holiness of repetition. Brick upon brick, word after word, night after night, breath after breath. Much of life is made not of rare brilliance, but of faithful recurrence. Sleep stories understand this instinctively. They do not rely on shock. They rely on rhythm. The Babylonians, too, seem to have known that rhythm is one of the oldest ways to stand against fear. On some nights, under a sky polished with stars, the upper terraces of the city may have seemed close to heaven indeed. A priest watching the moon from a high place might have felt that Marduk's order was not remote at all, but woven into every recurrence visible above him. A farmer returning from the fields after dark might have felt the same order differently, as tired muscles, safe walls, and supper waiting. A child drifting to sleep while elders spoke of Tiamat's sea and the setting of the constellations might have felt it simply as trust. The trust that someone wise once arranged the night and would go on arranging it. That trust does not remove sorrow from human life. No myth worth keeping ever makes such a shallow promise. People in Babylon still lost those they loved. Rivers still misbehaved. Rulers still overreached. Bodies still aged and failed. Yet the old tale offered a way to place sorrow inside a larger pattern. To say, yes, the deep still exists. Yes, wildness remains. Yes, grief may still rise. But there is also boundary, memory, return. There is a city. There are stars in known paths. There are stories capable of carrying the frightened mind through the dark. So the old story lingers easily beside us, not as something distant and buried in clay alone, but as a quiet assurance moving through the dark. What is unsettled may yet be gentled. What feels too wide may still find contour. The night may remain vast and still be kind enough to hold you. So let Babylon remain around us for a little longer. Let its rooftops and temple stairs and cooling walls become part of the atmosphere of this story. Let the old city glow at the edge of your mind, not as a site of politics or conquest, but as a keeper of calm remembrance. A place where people looked up, looked back, and felt less alone because a meaningful order had been spoken into the dark. As years become generations and generations become the long braided memory of a civilization, Marduk changes in the minds of the people without ever disappearing. At first he may have been remembered most vividly as the storm bearer, the one who confronted the ancient sea and imposed structure upon it. Later, he is also the keeper of kingship, the guardian of the city's central confidence, the divine intelligence behind law, order, measurement, and restoration. Yet beneath all these grand public titles, another quieter image persists: Marduk as presence. Not always a figure seen, more often a felt alignment in the steady return of dawn after troubled nights. In the way a river, though dangerous, usually remains in its bed, in the relief of finding the walls intact after a storm, in the confidence of a mason's level line, a scribe's measured column, a judge's patient hearing, a singer's remembered verse. Whenever disorder threatens and then yields to form, however briefly, the old mind of the city can sense his nearness. Perhaps that is why the tale endures so well in a gentle voice. It is not only about a dramatic event in mythic time. It is about a pattern recognizable in smaller scales. A household put back in order after grief, a field restored after flood, a frightened child soothed by familiar words, a life that could have scattered but somehow finds rhythm again. The cosmic story echoes in intimate places, and because of that echo, it keeps emotional power. If you had stood on a Babylonian rooftop at the right hour, just before true dawn, you might have understood this without explanation. The eastern horizon would still be mostly dark, but a thin gray silverness would begin to gather at its edge. The stars would remain visible, though less sharp. The air would be briefly cool, carrying traces of river damp and oven smoke, not yet fully risen. Somewhere a priest might already be waking. Somewhere a baker might knead dough in near darkness. Somewhere a sleeper would turn over and draw a blanket closer for one last portion of night. In that poised interval, when the world belongs equally to darkness and to the coming light, Marduk's presence would make perfect sense. Not a distant abstraction, not merely a heroic memory, a balancing force felt in the quiet reliability of transition. There are powers that dazzle by breaking, others rule by fear. The gentlest power is the one that arranges, that gives rivers their banks and stars their courses, that leaves room for life to unfold without drowning in formlessness. In that sense, Marduk lingers here, not only as a victor, but as a keeper of steadiness, a presence felt wherever wildness is given shape enough for rest. Even the memory of Tiamat changes over time beneath such stability. She does not vanish from the worldview. One does not erase the deep mother entirely, because no one who lives near water and weather can forget the older wildness beneath order. But she becomes less a looming threat than a remembered source. The sea beyond the channels, the unboundedness beyond the walls, the grief beneath the law. To remember her is to remember that order, however precious, rests against a more ancient vastness. The two need not cancel each other. In a mature city, they coexist as warning and as wisdom. Perhaps what people felt, standing under those Babylonian stars, was something simple and generous. Peace is not the end of all chaos. Peace is chaos, held within kind borders, enough for human beings to plant, to love, to sing, and at last to sleep. As listeners much later, we may borrow that feeling for a while. We may let the river, the temple, the tablets, the rooftops, and the measured heavens repeat the same soft message in different forms. You do not need perfect control to rest. You need only enough shelter for the body to soften and enough rhythm to trust the night. And so the story grows quieter here, thinning from event into atmosphere. The city beneath the stars becomes less a place to analyze than a place to breathe in. A dream of steadiness, a remembered arrangement of roof, river, temple, and sky. Picture the lanes of Babylon now after midnight. Most lamps have gone dark. Doors are closed. Dogs sleep curled in shadow. The river continues in its patient course beyond the walls. Above, the constellations watch without hurry. The temple stands, tier upon tier, no longer bright with festival, but still holding its silent charge. And somewhere in the sleeping city, a voice, perhaps in memory only, whispers once more the old assurance that from chaos came shape, from shape came dwelling, and from dwelling came rest. That whisper is enough. It does not have to argue. It does not have to persuade the whole waking mind. It only has to settle into the part of you that recognizes rhythm when it hears it. The part of you that already knows how good it feels when disorder loosens and the world becomes manageable again. This is where the tale begins to turn toward dream. Not because it has ended in a tidy way, but because it no longer needs to push forward. Its deepest promise has already been delivered. There is a sky, there is an earth, there is a city of memory, there are humans to witness. There is enough order for a night to unfold gently. And if you wish, you may remain a little longer in that old world before letting it blur. You may stand on the roof and feel the cool air. You may hear the faintest bell or chant carried from the temple district. You may watch the moon leaning over the river and think of how long it has kept its rounds. You may feel, without needing to say it aloud, that the storm who brought peace is still present anywhere a frightened world remembers how to breathe evenly again. Now the city can begin to soften at the edges. Let the outlines of Babylon grow a little less exact. Let the temple steps blur into shadow. Let the blue glaze of sacred walls deepen toward night until color is almost only memory. Let the voices of priests and workers and families withdraw one by one, not vanishing abruptly, but receding the way sounds do when sleep begins to move closer than thought. Even the river may seem farther away now, though it still travels steadily through the dark, carrying reflections of stars that were set in place before any human name was spoken. The old story has done what stories like this hope to do. It has brought us from formlessness to shelter, from anxiety to pattern, from the pressure of becoming to the relief of having arrived somewhere inhabitable. There is nothing more you need to carry from it with effort. Whatever remains will remain on its own. Whatever drifts away may drift away. The listener does not have to be a scribe tonight, so allow the images to separate gently from one another, like boats loosened from the same post. Marduk need not stand sharply before you now. Tiamat need not rise in detail. The council of gods, the mounting storm, the shaping of rivers, the building of Babylon, all of it may begin to turn soft, as if a veil of evening mist were moving through the story from end to beginning. This is good. This is the drift that sleep likes best, not forgetting by force, but remembering less tightly. You may sense, if only faintly, how the tale is circling back toward where it began, toward water, toward darkness made kind, toward that first hush before names hardened into separate things. We traveled a great distance through gods and grief and world-making, yet the deepest current underneath it all was always the same slow movement, from unrest toward rest. There is something comforting in that circular shape. The world begins in the deep, rises through sound and struggle, becomes a place of walls and fields and stars, and then, in the retelling, settles back into the deep again. Human life often feels like that too. We rise into noise and labor and questions, and each night we seek some small return to the undivided hush that can hold us without asking for explanation. Picture now the roof of Babylon one last time, the bricks still warm underneath the cooling air, the city's final lamps flickering low, the moon tilting westward, a sleeper wrapped in cloth, breathing slowly, while someone nearby, perhaps a parent, perhaps an elder, perhaps memory itself, speaks so gently that the words loosen into cadence. The voice does not argue. It does not explain. It only continues long enough for the body to believe it may finally let go. The body understands what the mind can set down for a while. It understands steadiness. It understands repetition. It knows the difference between shelter and alarm. If this tale leaves anything with you, let it be that quiet bodily sense that walls may stand, stars may keep their paths, and even great waters may be crossed by a patient voice. There is a hidden promise in the story that need not be spoken too loudly. What feels formless in us does not have to remain formless forever. Thoughts can settle. Fear can widen and then thin. Sorrow can be given a gentler container. The mind that seemed too full for sleep may still find its channels. This is not because everything is solved, but because rest does not require a finished life. It requires only enough safety for the inner sea to grow calm. And now perhaps the old city is already farther away than it was a moment ago. The rooftops blur into a single dark mass beneath the sky. The temple becomes silhouette. The river becomes sound rather than sight. The names Apsu, Tiamat, Ea, Damkina, Kingu, Marduk, Babylon grow lighter, like leaves set down on moving water. They no longer need to be held in order. They can float past in any sequence the half-dreaming mind prefers. If another night finds you returning to this story, the city will still be there. The waters will still be there. The stars will still be making their old crossings. Old myths are patient that way. They do not resent being slept through. They are content to stand watch at the threshold between waking and dream, saying only as much as the listener can carry into the dark. So let us move still farther back now, away from bricks and hymns and human memory, away from the shaped earth and the vaulted sky, back toward the ancient hush that held all of it before it began. The way home from a story at bedtime is often the same as the way in, slowly, softly, by water. And so, without needing to decide exactly when the story ends, you may simply find yourself floating once more. The roof is gone now. The city has fallen gently behind. The temple, the river, the walls, the fields, the written tablets drying in the heat, the high, bright ceremonies, the low, quiet household voices, all of them have loosened into distance. What remains is quieter and older, the sensation of being held, the sense of dark water around you, not cold, not threatening, only deep enough to carry whatever is left of waking thought out beyond the edge of attention. Somewhere very far away, the ordered sky still turns. Somewhere the moon keeps its patient path. Somewhere rivers continue through land once lifted from the sea. Somewhere the old city rests beneath stars that have crossed over countless sleeping bodies. But you do not need to follow any of that now. It is enough to know that the world, in the language of the tale, has been shaped and held. You may rest inside that holding. Let the breath become your only measure for a while. In, like a tide arriving at a silent shore. Out, like water smoothing the sand. In, slow and unhurried. Out, softer each time. If a thought rises, let it rise the way a small bubble rises through ancient water and disappears at the surface without needing to be examined. If an image returns the great sea, the hall of gods, the newborn child of wisdom, the stars being placed one by one, let it return dimly, kindly, and then drift on. Sleep does not ask for a cleared mind. It asks only for a mind that is no longer gripping itself so tightly. You are not required to witness the whole night. You are allowed to sink beneath it. The oldest waters know how to hold unfinished things. They held the world before it took shape. They can hold one more human weariness with ease. Lay it down there, the questions, the plans, the little tensions still glowing in the nerves. Let them all lower into the deep, where no answer is demanded before morning. And if some quiet part of you still wants a final image, let it be this one. Above, a sky of measured stars. Below, a world gently at rest. Between them, the broad and tender dark. Nothing breaking, nothing urgent, only the calm after shaping, the hush after story, the great slow kindness of night continuing. Perhaps Marduk remains there in the way a rhythm remains, not as a figure standing before you, but as the feeling that things have settled enough, that the inner waters are not raging now, that the walls are sound, that the stars know where they are going, that you may trust the dark for a little while and let it carry you farther than thought can go. And perhaps Tiamat remains there too, not as threat, but as depth itself, the ancient mothering vastness underneath all forms, reminding you that even before the world had a name, there was already a place to float. So drift there now. Drift where the story began. Drift where the day cannot follow. Drift beneath the old stars and beyond them. Drift until even these words become only rhythm. And if sleep has already taken you by the hand, then let it lead without resistance into whatever dream waits beyond the first sea.